Are what our Canadian friends are up to. Actually, we're going to hop over and we're going to read an article straight out of Canada, a story based on Canada. Actually, I got to give a shout out to Trembling Colors. He sent me this article or showed it to me earlier today, and I figured it would be worth looking at considering we've talked about Canada, its assisted suicide MAID program. So they are getting ready. The last time we talked about this, it was them whether or not they were going to pass a bill to expand the criteria, making it easier and making the net wider for people that want to utilize the MAID services. That passed, and it goes into effect in March. And there are a bunch of advocacy groups out there, nonprofits, etc., that advocate on behalf of these kinds of public policies. One of them is Dying with Dignity Canada. They've been around for a very long time. They've had an online presence of some sort for at least 12 years, and but nobody knows about them. Like, nobody actually gives a fuck about them except I guess the media. Like, the people that work at this place are the kind of people that they'll have on panel shows and stuff to have debates about the topic, Prophet says, I wonder how many burn hours you'd get out of her blubber oil. Oh, shit. I mean, that's some info we need. We got to figure that out.
Okay. God damn. Okay. Well, that's good info, man.
I mean, that's what we need to get, the good info. So Canada, Medical Assistance and Dying Advocacy Group calls on government to expand eligibility to mature minors. Again, we're circling this concept, because everything is connected. All of this nihilistic, weird, postmodern bullshit's all connected. And this is all about children consenting to things. Seems to be like a theme with these people. It's kind of, I don't know, mildly alarming how much interest they have in people's children. So the article goes on, despite facing pushback, a euthanasia advocacy group in Canada is continuing its efforts to have medical assistance in dying eligibility expanded for children as young as 12. Since 2021, Dying with Dignity Canada, a national charity claiming to be dedicated to improving the quality of dying, has been lobbying the Canadian government to amend existing age requirement of 18 years of age to extend to persons at least 12 years of age and capable of making decisions with respect to their health. The push came shortly after Bill C-7 received royal assent on March 17, 2021, resulting in the expansion of physician-assisted suicide in Canada to individuals whose death was not reasonably foreseeable, including those suffering from mental illness. Now, there are some stats. I don't know if this article is going to get into it, but this program has been around for a little while. So it's been around since 2016, 2015. Maybe 2014. It could be as early as 2014. And from the years like 2014 to 2021, like 1,200 people used it. From 2022 to almost the end of 2023, 10,000 more people had used it. It's an ever-expanding program. Because I think, I have kind of a very cynical, dark take on this, because I don't think there's a way to actually present this any other way. I do not think this is actually a good thing to tell people that this is an option in their lives. I think that the social services in Canada are completely fucked, and they cannot afford the way they do things, and they're trying to cull a large portion of the population. Last time we talked about this, we watched some of Canadian editorials, like kind of their 60 Minutes and stuff, about people that were utilizing MAID. One of them was like a 54-year-old lady who had bad hips and a bad knee, couldn't afford surgery, even in grand old Canada. She couldn't afford surgery. She was on assistance. She lived in the shitty house, etc. And she was offered the program and accepted into it. Those are the types of people that seem like kind of a big target. They always try to paint it as something, this is about the dignity and, people with terminal illnesses, elderly people, etc. That's the way they always couch it. And they always try to make it kind of seem kind of nice and warm and inviting rather. And they even had commercials that were kind of melancholy and earnest about the freedom, the dignity of fucking dying. They had this ghoulish thing with this woman that actually ended up going through the program, but it was like just about her life before she actually went through with it. And it was more or less, she was just kind of a depressed person. So it's real. Like the slippery slope of this is actually it's real. It's happening. It's happening. And I know it may seem like alarmist to point something like this out and be like, oh, well, that'll never happen. Who's to say it wouldn't happen? Look what's going on in Canada when it comes to like parental rights concerning their children in like gender affirming care. They can take your fucking kids away there if you don't comply with that shit. And again, it goes back to, can a child consent to kind of these irrevocable things? And I think it is intensely ghoulish to even suggest, even that there's an advocacy group out there talking about this, that a kid as young as 12 years old, a mature minor, could possibly make this kind of decision. Let me see here. Prophet says, always wrapped in soft language, die with dignity. Begone, shaitan. Prophet also says, I'm even more cynical than that, Sean. Do you think they're pushing MAID on migrant population they work so hard to bring into Canada? No, because there are replacement workers. You know, the Canadian people, they have too much of this notion of like of not being slaves. Let me see here. Where were we? The parliamentary review of the bill included advance requests for MAID, the state of palliative care, the protection of people living with disabilities, and eligibility for MAID of mature minors. In a blog post summarizing the issues of the parliamentary review, Dying with Dignity adds that it believes eligibility for MAID should extend to mature minors who have a debilitating or incurable medical diagnosis, because their life doesn't matter, and their quality of life and who they are and what they could accomplish doesn't matter. They can read the future. Dying with Dignity acknowledges that Canadian society will likely expect a minimum age for mature minors in the legislation, even though the emphasis at common law is on capacity and maturity and not chronological age. Oh my God, that's a pretty insidious little line there. Even though the emphasis at common law is on capacity and maturity and not chronological age, reads the post. Again, another almost rationalization to fuck your kids. For this reason, Dying with Dignity asked that Parliament amend the existing age requirement of 18 years of age to extend to persons at least 12 years of age and capable of making decisions with respect to their health. As with adults, there should be a presumption of capacity for these minors. Really, who gets to decide that? Like, what is the standard? What's the rubric you're going to use to figure that out? In addition to experts sounding the alarm on the potential implications expanding assisted suicide for minors as young as 12 may have, many online were quick to point out that this extension could blur the lines of other age of consent laws. See? I guess we're on the same page here. While the Dying with Dignity calls to drop the age of eligibility for MAID have been available since 2021, discussion was renewed this week after screenshots of Dying with Dignity Canada's website began circulating on X, prompting outrage and confusion. Gender-critical commentator Serena Patrick stressed that the advocacy group's push for children to access MAID was a slippery slope. Canada is lost, she wrote. And if you legislate for this, how on earth do you hold on to any of your age of consent laws? Because that's the point. Really, at the bottom of it, I kind of think that's the point. All of the people that get involved in public policy and advocacy groups, they're all psychopaths from the humanities. And they're all single, childless ghouls. Not everybody that's single and childless is a ghoul, but these people are ghouls. They have no business doing these kinds of things or advocating for anything. They're psychos. They're ideologues. They've bought into an elitist project. And this is what they're doing. Prophet says, I'm not getting in the pod unless all my figures fit in there with me. And trust me, they can't fit. Let me see here. What kind of country does this to children? If kids can be considered mature enough to choose death, irreversible medical treatment, I'm guessing the next step will be to remove the age of consent. That's a logical conclusion to that, especially the way that shit was worded. I mean, If kids can be considered mature enough to choose death, irreversible medical treatment, I'm guessing next step will be to reduce/remove the age of consent. Yes. The debates surrounding further expansions of Canada's already liberal MAID program have been contentious, with some, such as retired physician and member of Dying with Dignity's Clinicians Advisory Council, Dr. David Ames, claiming it is arbitrary and illogical to ban children from accessing MAID. Others, like Charlotte Ann Malachowski, interim chair of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, said that Canada needed to put more emphasis on living with dignity over dying with dignity. Well, at least somebody with a fucking conscience is in there. Holy shit. Parliament needs to address its failures in the current regime for Canadians to see ending their life as the only option, explained Malachowski. In particular, Parliament needs to focus on the many worrying accounts of individuals who have access or are considering accessing MAID because Canada is failing to fulfill their fundamental human rights. She added, in an era where we recognize the right to die with dignity, we must do more to guarantee the right to live with dignity. Which, of course, this person has to be a socialist, and they think they're just, let's just throw more money at this shit. Just throw more money. That always works. That's always something that fixes any problem. It's an elitist mindset. That's a rich person's mindset. Well, just give him some money. Just make it go. I don't even want to talk about this shit. Just give him some money. Can we just donate some fucking money? Let's listen to. So this is the woman that's one of their spokespeople for Dying with Dignity Canada. So I'm sure they have chapters all over the fucking world. Dr. Justine Dembo, complex assessments and MAID requirements. So she was here, I think, because she's, totally not part of the Canadian government and just an advocate, but she's here to clarify some things. Again, I want to point out, as is often true, as we often come to find out, a lot of these kind of organizations or even public figures that we're told are authorities or are very popular or have a following, like these are very popular organizations. This is very popular, public policy. When you go online and look at their online profiles, they have no followers. They have barely any interaction whatsoever. It's like they're Zoobox. Like they're just dumping shit into the void. You know what I mean? Like they do barely Zoobox numbers. Zoobox has more subscribers than Dying with Dignity Canada, and this channel has been around for 12 years. And semi-regularly uploads. Trump makes as slippery as gutter oil. Slippery slope as gutter oil. All right, let's see what she has to say. There's a few videos we're going to look at. For some reason, I think they broke them all up into 2-minute chunks, like a long-form interview.
There's been a somewhat of a media storm.
Also, I gotta make note. It says, what does it say?
Over the last number of months,
if your sole underlying medical condition is a mental disorder, you are not eligible to apply for medical assistance in dying until March 17th, 2024. Yeah. Well, I wonder who they're targeting. I wonder who they're trying to plant little seeds in there. For medical assistance in dying. God.
I believe to be fairly biased accounts in that I'm aware of the details of some of the cases that have been presented in the media. Accounts that make it look as though someone was approved for MAID because of poverty or a lack of housing, but in fact really want to emphasize that that is not legal, that we as MAID assessors and providers are not permitted to approve someone for MAID for that reason because of the criteria for MAID, which require the grievous and irremediable illness.
So, yeah. They get people in there that are poor and can't afford, surgeries and stuff, kind of like the story I was talking about just a little while ago. And they use those reasons instead. They just don't check off on a box that, are you kidding me? Do you think they're doing very thorough assessments up there when the number had jumped by 10,000? Trembling says, Klingon Andy McDowell here. Ooh, good call.
That said, our system is far from perfect. We do have people living in poverty. We do have inadequate disability supports in many places and for many individuals. And I don't want to dismiss the impact of those kinds of vulnerabilities. or what we call psychosocial issues, which may
Yeah, because she wants that to be included. She wishes that they could just check a box and be like, trouble paying rent. Check. Here you go.
include poverty, housing, risk, violent situations, impacts of severe mental illness, and social isolation, just to name a few. So those things do exist, and there are people with inadequate resources. The MAID assessor's job is to ensure that appropriate resources have been offered precisely for that reason. That said, in any context, whether it's sole mental illness or track 1 or track 2, those types of vulnerabilities could exist for anyone requesting MAID. And also people who are not considered to be vulnerable by standard definitions.
Yeah, you think a lot of the people that come and talk to the Canadian government to help them commit suicide, do you think most of them suffer from some type of mental illness? Really? And I love that this is not like the determinant factor about their ability to make a decision. That doesn't even fucking factor in.
Can still be vulnerable. You can imagine someone who's used to being in control, who's been high functioning, who's wealthy, who has lived a very privileged life, finding themselves in a situation where they're out of control because they have an illness that they themselves can't fix. They may define dignity as a certain element of control that they can no longer have, and they may be vulnerable for that reason. So we can't assume that.
Even people make impulsive, rash decisions during stressful times, do you mean? Wild.
The only vulnerable people are those who are marginalized in some of the more conventional ways.
So this is a way to be just like, no, listen, we got to kill a lot of white people. We got too many French crackers up here in Canada. It's time for them to go. Let's just be real, okay?
I would say that these are challenging assessments in that we cannot completely divide someone's suffering between the illness only or their situation only. Usually it's the totality of a person's circumstances that affect their suffering, and we have to take into account the totality of the circumstances.
How do they weigh these things? Like if you're a psychological disposition, whether it's because of mental illness or for stress, depression, whatever, what degree is that like part of the decision making, whether or not somebody's eligible? Like they don't ever get into any specifics. It's just these kind of nebulous things that are out there. But she wants those things. The things she's talking about is what this group advocates for. They advocate for pretty much you to do it almost regardless. Like we're going to get to the point, it's going to be like when they were, the slow rolling of legalizing marijuana rather. It's at some point before it was kind of the way it's been for the past couple of years with all these weird Delta 8, Delta 9 shit. You could just be like, I got depression and my back hurts. And they'd be like, here's your medical marijuana card. That's how it's going to be for suicide in Canada. They're just going to be like, well, you got bad back, bad knees. Ooh, that's rough. It's probably tough to get around. Depressed. Have you seen this brochure? Trelling says, look how giddy she is about this. Quote unquote, another day, another life offered up to our dark lord.
So we can't exclude someone from MAID who meets all the criteria and is suffering from that grievous and irremediable condition simply because they live in poverty or they're on disability and disability is not enough. We have to allow someone to make an autonomous decision with.
What if it's not life-threatening? Is it only if it's irredeemable disease? I don't think that's even the actual standard right now. Or if it is, they are playing very fucking loosey-goosey with it.
In their limitations of their own circumstances. An autonomous decision doesn't mean there are no limitations. An autonomous decision means that someone weighs their own options within their own circumstances and makes their own choice. So it's a fine balance, and these assessments, again, will often take multiple visits and a lot of gathering of collateral information.
It's also they just created more jobs, just more process, just more bureaucracy to function this. Now there's a bunch of people that are making like $60,000 a year to interview these people to see if they want to kill themselves. It's very self-serving.
in order to ensure we're doing the very best we can to provide people with the appropriate resources and to provide MAID for the appropriate reasons.
Now, I would like some proof of this. Now, we'll see what else she says. The difference between MAID and suicide. Okay, let's see it. Let's hear it. Let's hear it, Justine.
With respect to the real difference between suicide and MAID, the government has determined in Carter that sometimes a request...
Hey, guys, the government said so. They said it's different, so it's different. Check it out.
...for MAID or a desire to...
Yeah, because the government can't advocate for suicide. It's just bad optically.
...in one's life due to unbearable suffering can be rational. And that's the concept of rational suicide that people may have heard of before. So the key difference...
Why do they need you to do this? Then, if it's a rational decision, if it's something that needs to be done, then why do they need the government to do it for them? Why do they have to fucking sully somebody else's hands? Right? Look at those fucking eyes. What a nut. Look at the intensity there. She looks like Dario Argento. Like from 1987.
This person making a rational and capable decision, and that involves having a realistic appraisal of their medical situation and their options. The other thing is that the MAID process itself requires a certain degree of stability because someone is going through multiple assessors over multiple visits. They are making a request and going through the medical system and not doing this on their own or in a secretive manner. So there are many different dimensions to that.
I mean, I guess that they're trying. The implication here would be that it's less of an impulsive decision. Like if you have to go through all these processes, you have to talk to a battery of people. It's going to give you a lot of time to reconsider. I assume that's what she's getting at here.
There are additional supports through the process of going through the MAID assessment, which may lead to some alternative options. And there's also... Can we
get some stats on that? You guys have been doing this for like 9 years, maybe 12 years. If this channel started 12 years ago, maybe it was 12 years. Can we get some data on the people that have gone through the process and decided not to go through with it? I wonder what those numbers are. Something tells me there's probably not a lot of them because I'm sure these people are just catered to, coddled, and encouraged through the entire fucking process. Because they can't, if they don't like affirm their feelings, then they're bad people. Who the fuck are you to question me? Question what I'm doing. Trembling says she reminds me of Karen Black at the end of Trilogy of Terror. Oh, good call. Trembling with the good calls.
Consistent request over time and the ability to get through that process. So that itself also creates some distinctions between MAID and suicide. What I will say also is that some people requesting MAID can be suicidal. And part of our job as assessors, as in any other medical context, would be to assess suicide risk. And if someone is at risk of suicide in the conventional sense.
So is this like some sort of like fantasy scenario she has about her work where she's just like, well, you know, people just come in to just talk about their options. Do you think that people that come to MAID are not like in some degree suicidal? I mean, maybe not. I mean, like I always refer back to that story. Maybe it's worth like revisiting of that woman. I would have to find it. I have no idea where the fuck it is. It was like a year and a half ago. But there's this woman. She was just an old lady, and she wasn't like, she didn't have a terminal illness and stuff. She just had physical ailments. It was hard to move around. She couldn't afford to live on her disability, etc. Same old story. And that is what was driving her to make that decision. She almost seemed like she didn't want to do it, but she felt so much pressure to go through with it. You know, people do have a problem, especially people that are maybe are in these circumstances or have kind of any kind of mental issues or mental disorders. Sometimes they are incredibly compliant to assumed authority figures. And they're going to get themselves, these autistic people, in these situations, talking to these people, and they're just going to assume what they're telling them is good advice.
or if we're not sure, then that person would need to be protected. And sometimes that means involuntary hospitalization if there is a risk, too high a risk that we assess to be the case. So I've had to do that before. There are times where someone is suicidal when they're requesting MAID. Most of the time not, but sometimes.
But sometimes, let me see here. This would be a good one. What MAID eligibility could look like in March 2024. So that is what's coming upon us. And maybe she'll just lay it out. She's going to lay out her suicide utopia.
An example of someone who might be eligible under that law, maybe someone who is, let's say, in their 60s. They've suffered from a severe mental.
Of course, they're always going to go to this kind of example. The one, oh, it's an old person, which is also kind of dark because it just implies, it presupposes that we kind of value the life of elderly people a lot less than we do other people. Because it's, because that's why you go with somebody, oh, they're in their 60s, they're, mental illness all their lives, and they just need reprieve, There's no one there to help them. We can't help them, even though we told them that we could for 20 years prior to this. But, mental
illness such as depression throughout their lives, maybe since their 20s for many decades. They have had access to and undergone extensive interventions of different varieties. So there may be treatments that are biological, like let's imagine someone who's had 15 or 20 antidepressant trials, including maybe mood stabilizers or antipsychotics, which we also sometimes use. They've also had maybe neurostimulation, and that would be treatments like electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. They would also have had psychotherapy. The standard evidence-based psychotherapy for depression would be cognitive behavioral therapy. We also sometimes use something called interpersonal therapy. They may have undergone individual and group therapy. The person may have also been in hospital before because of exacerbations of their illness.
So really like crazy people that are in their equivalent of mental institutions. Well, they gotta go too. Let them die with dignity.
And has had hospital or residential treatment. So it's someone who has had an extensive history of treatment, but without a response in their illness or without sufficient response that their quality of life is acceptable to them.
Yeah, being a ward of the state, essentially. Honestly, we can only provide so much in these facilities, so we got to kill them. There's too many of them. We really overplayed our hand here, but hey, we got elected.
They're still suffering unbearably. That person would have to meet all the criteria already required, including capacity with respect to decisions and all of the safeguards Jocelyn outlined.
Really, how would you go about that for one of these people? You know what I mean? How would you go about talking to somebody that's that fucking crazy? How do you make that assessment? And then, who gets to decide? Again, what is the standard? What's the rubric here?
Outlined in the beginning.
I assume she knows. She's making reference to these things.
And that person would be making...
Also, shout out, she's a she, her. Pronouns in the bio, obviously.
Request voluntarily, which is part of those requirements. In a perfect world, they would have had access to all of the reasonable interventions. And if they hadn't, they would have been helped to get access to that by the MAID assessor advocating or working with their treatment team to ensure that that's been done.
Now, these are all hypothetical. This is pie in the sky stuff. Pie in the sky. Of course, we would assume that the MAID assessor would, do everything exactly right. And these are perfect scenarios.
And
They just want to empty Canada out of the crazy people. Listen, hey, I get it. I understand. At least have the balls to say it out loud, you freaks.
This person has hopefully also had access to appropriate income supports and housing. And again, that would be offered if it had not yet been as part of the MAID assessment. So this might be the picture of someone you see. And I have assessed patients like this, many of whom actually have had the means outside of public healthcare. They've actually had the means to achieve numerous treatments and high quality care. And so for those individuals,
So we get these kind of mentally ill, neurotic people, and we feed into their neuroses. We do nothing else to help them cope or anything like that. Yeah, I'm sure. These people are, we've seen the best doctors in the world. We've seen the best doctors in the world, and you know what? I'm still a grump. I'm still a grump, and I don't like it. Trummick says the big turnaround, and everyone involved with this are tried for murder.
they've reached a point where they can't bear to continue going on as is.
Yeah, they exist. People like that exist for sure. Let's see here. I think there is some more with her. The assessment process. Okay, so why did they cut this up like this? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Who is this for? 238 people have watched this. Kathy Gibson says they need to make it more accessible to everyone. There's 2 comments on this video. Another one says there have been messages sent on how the government can improve for the next election. Have you read them? Oh, this is probably the antinatalists. The antinatalists, they're always haunting these kinds of halls.
These assessments.
Let me die with dignity. Even the best orgasm is not worth the worst pain. It doesn't make up for it, boys.
Will not be in one visit. In my experience, assessments on track 2 are often over many visits, often over many months, even years. The average amount of time, I believe, in Belgium for assessments for sole mental illness is 10 months, but some are years. And so this is longitudinal. This is a chance to see someone in many different situations over time and get a very full understanding of how consistent their request is and of themselves as a person and the way they're making this decision. So these are complex assessments. The assessment process would also involve getting collateral information, as I said, where possible, from the treatment team and from loved ones. And if there are support.
What if they have no loved ones? I have a feeling a lot of these people do not have loved ones. You know what I mean?
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.
Supports that haven't been put in place, the assessor's role would be to speak with the person's treatment provider about trying to put those in place. And in some provinces, it will be permissible for the assessor to advocate on the behalf of the patient or to make referrals themselves.
Wow, that's dangerous. Allowing assessors to speak for the patient if it's determined that they're not, able to make the decision themselves. Don't worry, guys. We got an assessor, okay? Actually, I have exclusive footage of one of the MAID assessors right here.
You're dressing up in lingerie before your mirror at home, tucking your dick between your legs, imagining you have a vagina.
I mean, I don't know how well that's going to work, but that's the process, and it deserves to be respected. All right, let's see what else. I think that there's another one with her, or maybe they just have other ones. Jocelyn Downey, a breach of Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, breaking down MAID eligibility from 2 months ago. So this is, I wonder, are they talking about the old one? I'm more interested into what the new program is because they lie. I don't think they're following the guidelines very closely, and I think that's public knowledge as well. Because some of the stories, as that woman had pointed out, some of the stories she was like, well, I kind of take issue with some of the stories. They're not telling the whole story. These are sensationalistic. Trummick says, the interviewer, when you were a little girl playing doctor with your dolls, did you imagine you were putting them down because their pain was too much? Let's see here. Let's see what this woman has to say. Jocelyn Down. Just another face that I definitely want making decisions like this. Doesn't look like a psycho at all.
To be eligible for MAID in Canada, you have to be eligible.
She looks like a little old man.
For government-funded healthcare, be 18 years of age or older, have the capacity for making decisions with respect to your health. You have to have made a voluntary choice to request MAID, and it must be free from any kind of external pressure or undue influence from others. You have to give informed consent to MAID after having...
Listen, they say all this shit. They say it over and over and over again. How thorough do we believe that this is? Like I said, the number has jumped like drastically. We're talking thousands in just the past couple years. Trump says Jocelyn Downsey looking like Fauci. Oh shit.
Okay. God damn. Okay. Well, that's good info, man.
It's the good info, dude.
Having been told of all of the alternatives to MAID and told about MAID, and you must have been told about palliative care. You have to then also have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. It's a mouthful, but it's defined in the criminal code, so we know what it is supposed to mean. It's supposed to mean that you have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability. You have to be in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability, and you have to be experiencing.
Yeah, so if you're a person, I got to bring this up again. It's a great example of the woman who had like bad hips and bad knees, and it was hard for her to get around. That's technically, it will continue to decline. It'll continue to be a problem because she couldn't afford to get it fixed. She didn't have the money to get it fixed. She couldn't get in to see doctors, etc. All the things you hear about the Canadian healthcare system. So technically, it would actually fall into this category. Technically, right? Trelving says those employees were right about Ellen being mean.
Experiencing enduring and intolerable suffering that can't be relieved by means acceptable to you. And that suffering has to be being caused by either the serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability, or the advanced state of irreversible decline in capability. So that's what you have to have.
Like, that's actually very vague. It's because it sounds like they're talking about like, oh, you have like terminal cancer or something like that. But I'm telling you, because it's broad and kind of not specific, those terms could probably be applied to a lot of things.
In order to be eligible for MAID. Now, right now, mental illness is excluded from illness, disease, or disability. So remember a moment ago, I said you have to have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability. The law says, by the way, mental illness is not an illness, disease, or disability. So right away, you know that somebody who has a mental disorder as their sole underlying condition cannot be eligible for MAID because they're excluded by that provision. But somebody who has a physical illness, disease, or disability, a serious and incurable physical condition, and a mental disorder, they can.
And a mental disorder, which is because it's just depression. And if you're depressed because of your physical ailments, see, I told you, there's all these, fuck these people. They're ghouls, dude. Drumming says, man, I really hate her Blippy glasses. This is Blippy's nightmare mother. Only child.
Can be eligible. So
look at the smile she had on her face. She's like, yeah, if you're fucking sad and you got bad knees.
By that provision. But somebody who has a physical illness, disease, or disability, a serious and incurable physical condition, and a mental disorder, they can be eligible. So some people with mental disorders, as long as you got another condition, a physical condition, and you meet all the eligibility criteria, you can be eligible for MAID. But if mental disorder is your sole underlying condition, you're not eligible for MAID right now.
Look how excited she got right now. But don't worry, kids. But don't worry, everybody. She goes into Blippy's mom mode. Don't worry, everybody. In March, if you got a case of the grumps, well, boy, oh boy, we can head down to the MAID clinic and go talk to one of our expert assessors.
Zoobox. Bye.
That was it. We ended with her joy, her excitement. Man, how nice. What a gift. What a gift, really. Okay, so Dying with Dignity Canada, they are an advocacy group, but they're not the only people that do advocacy.